you know the background of how I got to be involved with the group SustainUS, but what is SustainUS? SustainUS is the youth network for sustainable development. It was founded in 2001 to prepare for the World Summit on Sustainable Development. And it's entirely youth-run. There's no paid staff. They run 3 different programs. The Agents of Change program, which is the one that I was involved with, it sends people to conferences like this one, or the UN Commission on Sustainable Development. They also run a citizen science program, which has a paper contest for youth papers on science. And they also have a number of geoclusters around the US where members of SustainUS are in a particular location and work on environmental issues within that particular location. But to give a little more background about a particular group that I travel with, and this is the whole group, there's 18 of us who attended the conference. We were selected 6 months before the conference and spent that 6 months preparing. Over that time period, and including the conference, we put in well over about 4,000 volunteer hours, easily. And to give a little more background on who we are, from all over the US. There's a town councilman in our group. There's students from Princeton and Columbia, and we are all in the ranges of 18 to 25 years old. And when we got to the conference, we hooked up with about 130 other youth who happened to be there from different countries, as well as a few others from the US. And before the actual official negotiations began, we held a pre-conference youth conference where we organized ourselves into policy groups, media groups, and a demonstration group and a network group. And those groups functioned throughout the conference to coordinate the actions of about 150 youth. And they worked amazingly well. I couldn't have imagined before the conference going into the situation and meeting 130 people I'd never met before. Also, by the way, I never actually met in person most of the people on my delegation before attending the conference. So basically, people I've never met before, and we worked so well together. That was partly to do with our daily meetings. Every day we start off the day with a 9 o'clock morning meeting where we have all of the youth come together, and we get report backs from the different groups on what was happening and anybody else who had any intel on the day, and we strategize as to what was going to be our main message for that day and how we wanted to spend our time and what we needed to have people at and reporting back. We were very, very busy. Like I said, everybody is busy at this conference. We work in 12 to 16-hour days. It's not really work because this is all the type of thing we would do in our free time, because it was our free time anyway. None of us were getting paid for it. We had the daily demonstration action that I talked about. We had multiple daily blog updates where we would sort of give the youth perspective on what was going on at the conference. We met with the official U.S. delegation only once. We weren't asked to meet with them again after that. You can perhaps imagine why. We were invited to speak at the closed informal on Article 6, and I'm going to explain this one a little to you because it's not exactly clear what that is. At the conference, there are 3 levels of negotiations. There's the main plenary, which is the big room you'll see in most of these pictures. And then there are contact groups where you have a smaller subset of official delegates hammering out a specific policy issue in which they'll bring back to the main plenary for review and approval and passage. And then there are also informal groups, which only the first 2 groups, NGO observers are generally allowed to go to. The closed informals, nobody's allowed to go to except for the party delegates, and not just any official delegate. It has to be the delegates that are involved in that informal. So say if I was an official delegate of the US, I could not go to some of these informals even though I had the highest level of access. So we were asked to, we got ourselves asked to speak at this closed informal on Article 6, which is Article 6 is the article on education. So that was pretty huge. We also worked collaboratively with the Climate Action Network, and that's the conglomerate of all of the environmental groups in the world, sort of, working on climate change action. And they coordinated all of the environmental groups. They're called INGOs, for environmental NGOs, at this conference. And we worked very well with them. One of the things we did in conjunction with them was to do the fossil of the day, which I'll be going over in a little more detail. And then we also had a side event, which I'll also be talking about, a press conference with UNICEF. We put a lot of pressure on the negotiators, and not only could we tell that we were doing it, but we actually had feedback from some of them that they witnessed us doing it, or they felt us doing it, which is pretty phenomenal, although sometimes that feedback wasn't always positive. And we also had a high-level use statement, which I'll also be talking about in a little more detail. So through all these things, we pushed a few key messages. Our first one was we wanted 80% reductions but from 1990 levels by 2050. And that's a 2% reduction per year. That's what, according to the IPCC, gives us our best chance of avoiding negative externalities from climate change. Our other main message was that it was our future that is at stake. A lot of the negotiations centered around talking about, future generations and what's going to happen farther off in the future. But we wanted to emphasize that it's really more immediate than that. We're going to be around in 2050 and then some. And we had this is again my delegation with some other actually, I guess they're called children. We were youth, they were children, and who worked together on pushing this message that this is really about our lives. It's not about future generations. It's about us. So think about that when you're making these decisions. And along with that, we really pushed the message that the effects are already being observed, as well as we wanted to make it a moral issue. It's not just a scientific issue. It's a moral issue. It's about intergenerational justice and justice between developing and developed countries. So through all our work, we generated a lot of media, and this is not, this is just a fraction of it. There's no way I could fit it all on a slide. It was mostly through our demonstration actions that we did. There was not a whole lot of interesting things to take video of at the negotiations. So our demonstration actions got quite a bit of attention. The one at the bottom there is one that we did in conjunction with the environmental minister from the UK, and that one pulled a lot of attention. And it also was in conjunction with the presentation of over 2 million signatures requesting action on climate change. And so it's just a sampling of some of the media that we got. And what was really interesting about this is just about every day we made it into the news in some country. And I really can't imagine ever being a part of a group of 150 people who, in the course of 2 weeks, will make it into the news in some country every single day. I just can't imagine that happening again. So that was a pretty phenomenal experience.